Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Takeaway Club, where I talk to interesting people across different walks of life to get to know their stories and, more importantly, how they got to where they are, including their motivations, habits, routines, and aspirations, some of which we can apply to our own lives. Hey, before we get into the episode, a quick update. Along with the podcast, we now have a newsletter. It's called Beat the Blues, a bite sized curation every Monday with the most interesting and random content that I come across in the week prior. Earlier, I used to do this in an ad hoc manner, sharing an article, giving book recommendations to my friends. That's when one of my friends suggested why not do this in a more organized fashion, and that's why we turned this into a weekly newsletter. Yes, we have seen a great response so far. It's a small non-intrusive email every Monday with a bulletin of whatever content I am currently into. It could be the books I'm reading, the podcasts I'm learning from, tweet threads that I enjoyed, just a small boost to kickstart your week, and hence the name Beat the Blues. So if you're someone who enjoys insightful random content but don't have the time to sit through and do the dirty work of browsing to find them, you're going to love this. It's super easy. Just head over to thetakeaway.club and hit the subscribe button, and you'll get the very next one. Hey people, thanks for tuning in to the Takeaway Club podcast. In today's episode, I have Karthik Subramanian, a kickass storyteller and a marketer. He's pretty popular on LinkedIn, and there is a good chance that you have come across at least a couple of posts from him. And if you haven't for some reason, I'd urge you to connect with him. I can guarantee you that you will be super glad that you did. I've known Karthik pretty much all my adult life. He was literally one of the first persons that I interviewed with when I began my career out of college. And anyone who has known him or even interacted with him briefly will agree that he's a super cool, a sagacious guy, really. Always eager to get smarter, always wanting to teach others whatever he has learned. And in a world of noisy LinkedIn posts and running behind vanity metrics, he's someone who is really doing things the right way. And if you are someone who's trying to build your brand on LinkedIn or even trying to establish your career as a marketer, then there are a lot of golden gems in the conversation that you're going to love. So, without further ado, Karthik Subramanian, people. Hi, Karthik.
Hi Krishna, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
How are things at Chennai?
Uh, Chennai is good. Chennai is slowly limping back to normal. I read in the papers that they're probably thinking of starting the metro next week. So there should be a lot of activity that we see in the coming months. But yeah, things are recovering.
Oh, nice, nice. Pretty excited to have you here. Of course, we go way back. We probably, our history starts right where my career starts, to be precise. We'll probably talk about that at the later point. Before we actually get into the conversation, uh,
Mhm.
I have to tell this. I've had over a dozen guests on the show, and none of the recording was set up with such ease. There would always be some back and forth, some rescheduling, and I used to like really work for it, and thank you for making this one so easy. I reached out to you a couple of weeks ago, and you were equally thrilled about it. And you set up a time, and you showed up right on the time. There was no delays or no rescheduling. That's pretty cool, Karthik. Oh, I have to say, as someone who has
Oh,
done this like a few times over the last few weeks, thank you for making this comfortable for me. Have to tell that right off the
absolutely.
bat.
Absolutely, absolutely. My pleasure. And the pleasure is always mine. Thank you for hosting me. And I'm not sure if I deserve those kind words. I'm just trying to live up to what I
Yeah,
promised you, Krishna. So, yeah,
yeah,
I'm
I'm
absolutely
pretty
glad to
sure
be here.
you do, and a lot of people listening would also agree with that. So that said, I thought a good place to start would be, a small recap of your story so far. I mean, people who know you on LinkedIn know how good a storyteller you are. So I thought, let me save up your life story for you. The best way you want to put it. So who's Karthik and what's your story?
Sure, sure. So, Krishna, my my career goes back. I was born in Mumbai, brought up in Kolkata, being an absolute cosmopolitan, metropolitan, whatever you want to call me. But yeah, uh, fairly very humble beginnings, humble backgrounds, and I started my career, my working career way back in 2005. I used to work for an equity research firm in Hyderabad. We used to cover some of the large cap software companies in the US, Microsoft, Adobe, Autodesk. Those were the companies that we used to regularly monitor. We used to publish research reports. Some of our clients were the hedge funds who had large sums of money and they were looking for ideas and stocks to invest for the short term as well as the long term, right? So we used to advise them on the stock ideas. But 2008-9 was the height of the financial crisis. One, so I have seen a few crises in the past. The closest one that I had associated myself with was the 2001 Asian currency crisis when stock markets tanked so much over a few days. But I could see it live, right, happen right in front of me, the 2009 crisis when Lehman Brothers collapsed. So after that, a lot of people changed their careers, and I was one amongst them. So I moved to a different role, a qualitative research role. So incidentally, Cognizant acquired our business unit then. So that's how I became part of Cognizant. And Cognizant, so within Cognizant, I explored a few research roles working with different business units for their uh, research requirements in terms of estimating the market size, researching a particular client, figuring out what are the cross-selling opportunities that we have for every client, supporting executives in their thought leadership. So around 2014, I moved to the Cognizant Quality Engineering and Assurance unit, which is the testing unit. And Cognizant has the world's largest testing practice that's more than $2 billion in revenue in size. So spent a lot of time in the marketing unit at Cognizant Testing, and a lot of it was driving thought leadership, working with the leaders in the on the thought leadership space, so figuring out what themes are you going to write for that year, who's going to write what are the events that we're going to plan, what are the webinars that we're going to host, and so it was good, it was enjoyable. Um, and that's where I understood what it takes to really plan an event, plan a webinar, or plan a content that needs to be pushed out. So there were so many levels of approvals before we got to it. So, but that really helped me understand the rigor behind pushing out content. It's not just uh, a simple a simple tactic that we do, right? So I spent a year in Accenture. Accenture was again on thought leadership. That was good, but then I had always the calling to join a startup because you learn a lot at startups. So that's where I worked. So I worked with. After that, I spent about close to 2 years at a company called at a B2B startup called Paperflight. Paperflight was awesome. I got a lot of my hands dirty and uncovered a lot of facets about marketing that I didn't have a chance to do in traditional B2B companies. So that was good. So now I'm a part of a company called Sport Mechanics, which is in the performance analysis, which is in the sports performance analysis space. Sports has always been my calling, so I'm enjoying my time here. It's been about 8 months. An absolute cracker of a career, absolute cracker of a tenure so far. So that's in a brief nutshell about me, Krishna.
So let me, dive into one of the most defining aspects of your personality throughout your career graph. The storytelling skill.
Mm-hmm.
You have this.
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself as someone to be, decent at finding some random stories. I used to write, as you know, even with my time at Plenty as well as Facilio, I was in charge of writing newsletters, and I used to come up with, some random stories, stitching that together what our product did, you know. But and then I was, a little proud of what I used to do, right? For my writing and for my knack for finding some cool stories. And
Yeah.
then, one random day I stumbled onto your LinkedIn content, and I see, you have like pages and pages of, such stories. They're all like, from eclectic fields. I think even recently you had one about Charles Darwin. You have one of your posts around how Darwin became the person that he is, and I remember one on KitKat's advertisement. So how do you continue to churn out these or curate these amazing stories week in and week out? What is your secret sauce there?
So, thank you again for your kind words, Krishna. But really, so there is this book which I urge our listeners to also take a look at, and the name of the book is Made to Stick.
I
It's written, yeah, it's been written by
Chip and Dan,
twins.
if
Yeah, Chip and Dan,
I,
exactly. So the main crux of the book is about stories, in a sense, stories that stick. So the authors have surmised that it's stories that actually stick with you for a longer period of time. So today uh, I was going through LinkedIn, and I figured one really anecdotal post about how LinkedIn made it, how Intel made it to the top of the charts by just using one simple phrase, Intel Inside. At a time when chips were there in all computers, they were the only ones who came up with a story saying Intel Inside. Intel was, they were still producing the same chips that other companies, other semiconductor companies were doing, correct? But that phrase changed the game of computers, and the ads that they created was superb, in the sense they were as if showing you go inside a spaceship of sorts or microchips and all that. So that created that wow feeling that, oh, Intel means it's technical. After all, they created the same chip that everybody else on the street was doing, correct? But I think that story really stuck me. So I feel deep down inside, every one of us has stories to say. All of us have got experiences. All of us have got narratives. The way we see, the way we perceive things, it could be simple. It could be really uh, the most simplest of stories, the most humblest of stories, if I may put it that way. So, from my perspective, I try to distribute, I try to share whatever little knowledge that I have. So I try my best to put in at least about a half an hour or close to an hour's worth of reading. Some days I'm not able to get that. So in that 1 hour or half an hour of reading, whatever I come across, I make sure that I share it with. If it's worth its weight, I make sure that others know about it. So whatever number of people, number of connections that I have on LinkedIn, if they can see it, they can benefit out of it. I think my job's done. So my only thing is about sharing stories that stick with me, and I'm sure that if it sticks with me, others will also be inspired. So
I,
so it's just about, like you said, like you very rightly pointed out, eclectic reading, make your reading as diverse as possible. I try to even read the packages of small medicines, the cartons, that gives you so much of idea and the diaspora that we have. So you discover unknown places, you discover where a particular thing was manufactured. There's so much for us to know. So, yep. So that, I hope that answers your query.
right. I probably, still pry you a little bit more and get after that secret sauce. I still feel like, you have this some amazing source. I don't know. It could be a Reddit rabbit hole, or some this big book that you have in your shelf.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, um, so so the thing is, it's about, like I said, it's about the story that sticks with you. So some of these authors, they have done the job for you, Krishna. From my perspective, if you look at it, some of these, like you said about Chip and Dan Heath or David Ogilvy or Joe Sugarman, they've already done the job for you. They've done the hard yards. They've put out books that are selling millions of copies. So there must be something in it that people are willing to read, willing to pay for, and loving to read. Correct. So all that I do is pick out the ones that really impress me. So the one about Darwin, Charles Darwin, was about how a 22-year-old graduate who just passed out of Cambridge University, who himself was doubting his abilities uh, to study geology. He embarked on a journey that probably changed the face of how we look at human evolution. Correct. So I knew that that story is really powerful, and the way. So I discovered that story in a book called *Sapiens* by this author, by this
Well,
Israeli historian
Noah
called
Harari.
yeah, Yuval Noah Harari. So that really struck me, and in fact, that book is got a ton of stories inside, and some of the characters in history that I read during my childhood days have been mentioned in it. So I really had the connection to that book. So it is about figuring out that connection, Krishna. It could be a newspaper flip. It could be, like I said, it could be about anything that you can lay your hands on. So I think what happens is, deep down, when you start reading eclectically, when you start reading a diverse mix of things, your brain starts making those neurological connections. So during conversations, during podcasts, during meetings, during, or maybe just standing under the shower, you start making those connections, and you start recalling them, and you make sure that, okay, so this is something that I really love understanding and comprehending. I feel this is something that I should share with the world. And by the way, I don't write for virality. uh, I really don't ever experiment with that.
Very true.
All that I'm
Mm.
all that I try and do is just write it and let it be. If it's good, people will find value out of it. If it's average, it's okay, it's fine. We'll do it better next time. So yeah.
That's probably one of the things that I really admire in you. Uh, I of late I've been active on LinkedIn, and a lot of us have been, within the Chennai circle, and to probably quote Basecamp here, this whole signal versus noise, I feel like it's highly disproportionate at times. Of late,
Mhm.
LinkedIn has been, a lot of noise. You're probably one of the last remaining people in my network who continue to use LinkedIn to genuinely create value, rather
Correct,
than run after the vanity metrics.
correct, correct. Yeah. Don't run after likes or comments. Just leave it at the table. If you've done your job, if you've done your research. So that's something I do. I make sure that all of my posts are well researched. None of it will be out of thin air. So unless it's something that I am inspired with, if it's an inspirational post where I'm egging on people to do well, do more, and all that, for which I don't really need to research. I just need to write it. That's it. But some of these posts where I'm trying to share stories, I make sure that I understand it well. I make sure that I'm not misrepresenting facts, because that defines you as a human being. Correct. That defines you as an author. That defines you as a writer. So yeah, if I am answering your query rightly, Krishna.
Hey, sorry to interrupt the flow of the conversation, but I had very important news that I couldn't wait to share. This chat with Karthik makes 15 episodes for the Takeaway Club, and I cannot believe it was only 4 months ago there was anything takeaway. And in just over the course of 4 months, I've gotten to talk with NGO leaders, vaccinators who are fighting the coronavirus, startup founders, and many other amazing people who otherwise wouldn't have gotten a chance to talk to or pick their brains on. And I felt that now would be a good time to put a pause on things and evaluate what worked, what didn't. Basically, going back to the drawing board and come back with a bang as soon as possible. But before we sign off for the time being, I do have an impromptu season finale with someone I've admired for several years. I managed to sit down with him for an insane Joe Rogan style conversation where we pretty much discuss everything under the sun, from the education system to marriages to B schools and everything in between. I don't want to give too much away right now, but just do a Google search for who's Batman of Korra, and you'll have my guest name there. So that episode marks the Takeaway Club season one's finale, if you will, and it should be out in a week or two. And I can guarantee you that you will love that conversation. Head over to thetakeaway.club and add your email there, and I'll personally track you down and send you the right links once the episode is out. Now, let's go back to the conversation with Karthik.
So that I hope that answers your query.
Right. I probably, still pry you a little bit more and get after that secret sauce. I still feel like, you have this some amazing source. I don't know, it could be a Reddit rabbit hole or, some this big book that you have in your shelf.
Yeah. I mean, um, so the thing is, it's about like I said, it's about the story that sticks with you. So some of these authors, they have done the job for you, Krishna. From my perspective, if you look at it, some of these, like you said about Chip and Dan Heath or David Ogilvy or Joe Sugarman, they've already done the job for you. They've done the hard yards. They've put out books that are selling millions of copies. So there must be something in it that people are willing to read, willing to pay for, and loving to read. Correct. So all that I do is pick out the ones that really impress me. So the one about Charles Darwin, was about how a 22-year-old graduate who just passed out of Cambridge University, who himself was doubting his abilities uh, to study geology. He embarked on a journey that probably changed the face of how we look at human evolution. Correct. So I knew that story is really powerful, and the way. So I discovered that story in a book called *Sapiens* by this author, by this
Well,
Israeli historian
Noah
called
Harari.
yeah Yuval Noah Harari. So that really struck me, and in fact, that book is got a ton of stories inside, and some of the characters in history that I read during my childhood days have been mentioned in it. So I really had that connection to that book. So it is about figuring out that connection, Krishna. It could be a newspaper flip. It could be, like I said, it could be about anything that you can lay your hands on. So I think what happens is, deep down, when you start reading eclectically, when you start reading a diverse mix of things, your brain starts making those neurological connections. So during conversations, during podcasts, during meetings, during or maybe just standing under the shower, you start making those connections, and you start recalling them, and you make sure that, okay, so this is something that I really loved understanding and comprehending. I feel this is something that I should share with the world. And by the way, I don't write for virality. uh, I really don't ever experiment with that.
Very true.
all that I'm
Mm.
all that I try and do is just write it and let it be. If it's good, people will find value out of it. If it's average, it's okay, it's fine. We'll do it better next time. So yeah.
That's probably one of the things that I really admire in you. Uh, I of late I've been active on LinkedIn, and a lot of us have been, within the Chennai circle, and to probably quote Basecamp here, this whole signal versus noise. I feel like it's highly disproportionate at times. Of late,
Mm.
LinkedIn has been, a lot of noise. You're probably one of the last remaining people in my network who continue to use LinkedIn to genuinely create value, rather than
Correct,
run after the vanity metrics.
correct, correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't run after likes or comments. Just leave it at the table. If you've done your job, if you've done your research. So that's something I do. I make sure that all of my posts are well researched. None of it will be out of thin air. So unless it's something that I am inspired with, if it's an inspirational post where I'm egging on people to do well, do more, and all that, for which I don't really need to research, I just need to write it. That's it. But some of these posts where I'm trying to share stories. I make sure that I understand it well. I make sure that I'm not misrepresenting facts because that defines you as a human being, correct? That defines you as an author. That defines you as a writer. So yeah, if I am answering your query rightly, Krishna.
I think I'd probably want to get your thoughts on this whole brand building on LinkedIn. Right? I know how
Hmm.
you feel about it, particularly how important brand building is. But I'm probably curious on your thoughts on doing it the right way, as opposed to this running after vanity metrics thing. That seems to be, obviously that's the easier of the two choices. You can either, grind through and create very valuable content that takes a lot of time for you to stitch up, or you can, put together some half-assed content out there and just, count on your network to just keep engaging with it. So what I don't know. I don't want to put it as advice. Maybe something like, what differentiates a good personal brand building strategy as opposed to a terrible one? Even though the terrible one looks promising, especially in the short haul.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, great question, Krishna. You know, I think from personal branding perspective. So the one thing, if there is one thing that I hate doing on LinkedIn is about gathering followers or making more connections. I cannot understand why people do that. But, but that doesn't mean that I am telling you not to make connections. I'm saying make the relevant connections, because if you want to benefit out of it and if you want to provide value to your people, you cannot have connections all over the place. My 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 point there is, let's say you are in the business of writing, you are an author, or let's say you are a SaaS marketer. You obviously cannot connect a lot with people who are not associated with that industry. Like probably somebody is in aerospace and defense who's in
Right.
hardcore manufacturing. He's there on LinkedIn just for the sake of it. Probably he doesn't even come to LinkedIn to produce content. But if you connect with all different kinds of people, you're not creating the right brand for yourself. Uh, I see a lot of people saying that, hey, you know what, I got 30,000 followers, I got 40,000 followers. Good. Kudos to you for your effort. Congratulations on getting to the 40K or 50K mark. But I would still, there are people who have that many followers, but they have 5 likes on their posts. Why is it that way? So it's simply because they probably don't have the right people who to follow them, or the right connections to do that. So so personal branding, if you ask me, uh, and I see this very often, people whom I follow and people whom I derive a lot of value say this very emphatically, and that is just give, give, and give more. Just keep giving, and maybe in the 70th or maybe the 100th or in the 150th step, maybe you can ask. Until then, just keep giving. Um, like, just shut your eyes, go for it, put out content, put out valuable content. It's okay even if you don't have a single like or a single comment or a single share. That's fine. It just tells you that there is more for you to learn, there's more for you to improve. Maybe probably you need to work on the headline, or you need to work on the copy of the post. But my premise is that just shut your eyes and go ahead and provide value to people. Like I said before, it's always about them first. If they like it, they will go for it. So there is one prose or one lesson in the Bhagavad Gita that I used to be very fond of. I'm still fond of it. I think it's revealed in the 11th chapter, and that is where Lord Krishna tells Arjuna that you've been born on this earth and your destiny is already determined. So all that you have to do is do your job, do your duty. Don't view them as your father, as your grandfather or nephews or your cousins and all that. So just go out, do your job. So I feel that really applies to content and marketing. Just do your job, give value to people, and if you're doing that correctly, if you're not doing it for virality, uh, you will you will be successful. So if you ask me to put a timeline to it, I cannot do that, but I would really urge people to do it for 6 to 9 months or 1 year. Test it out and see what works. If it's working for you, if it's not working for you, find out what needs to be tweaked and then go after it. But that's what my suggestion to people is, that brand building is a very, very conscious and personal thing. So please invest time on it in the right methodical way. That's what I would say, Krishna, if I'm
Right.
putting it the right way.
Really well put, Karthik. And I really hope, a lot of people, even including me, I take whatever you said here and actually try to implement it rather than just, hear it and leave at it. Because it
Mhm.
takes a lot of time. Like you said, it could take 10 months, it could take 12 months. Now, even last night I was listening to this a junior VC podcast where they had one of the co-founders of FinShots on there, and it was an amazing episode. To see them share their journey. FinShots is like ubiquitous today. Across college folks, across working professionals,
Mhm.
but nearly for 1.5 years they used to just keep writing and writing, and there were hardly anyone to follow. And one sudden day, Paytm CEO tweets about the story, and they haven't looked back since. So you never know where that big break will come from. Your job is to put your heads down and keep working at it,
Mhm.
as opposed to running after these hacks or shortcuts. Switching gears from our thoughts on LinkedIn a bit, let's talk about your career trajectory. Now, for the longest time in
Sure.
your career, you were the marketing in charge or the thought leadership in charge for traditional powerhouses like Accenture, Cognizant, right? So, how did you make the transition into the SaaS world from there? Especially at to a very early stage startup like Paperflight, which is probably a risky bet, at that stage of your career.
Yes, moving from a traditional B2B software IT organization that's been there in the business uh, for so many years to a startup company was a little risky, if you want to call it that way. And it's not easy making the transition from B2B to SaaS. It's not easy in a SaaS environment. Especially in a startup, you have to set up things. You have to make your hands dirty, get down to do that landing page or write the first blog or write that first email out for clients. But that is not the case in B2B organizations. In B2B organizations, people tend to uh, so I have experienced this in B2B organizations, right? We used to host our customers in gala events in the US and the UK, where it was more of meet and greet. I have not, or probably the marketers in those companies were probably seeing it, but I have never heard of having an awesome spreadsheet discussing the opportunities that were brought up in those meetings and the kind of revenues that might have been there, might have been discussed with the customers. Correct? I have never seen it happen that way in a B2B organization, but in a startup, it's never that way. If you meet a client, there has been opportunities that have been discussed. There have been a few uh, leads that were scored. You nudge the customer to take one more step. You encourage them to take one more step closer to signing the deal. So So you have to give up the luxury, if I may call it that way, of being a B2B company, thinking that, oh, somebody will get it done. In a B2B startup, you have to do it. In a startup, you have to, in a SaaS company, you are the person who's going to do it. So that way, I was very thankful that I joined Paperfly. The little time that I spent there, just shy of 2 years, I was happy because I learned so much. I could have never ever dreamed of, writing an end-to-end thought leadership piece and publishing it uh, while I was there in Accenture, because Accenture has got, I don't know, maybe 500,000 people worldwide. So it'll never go up on the website, but Paperfly gave me that opportunity to do it. So I'm very always thankful for my time that I spent there. And it gave me the time to experiment, figure out what is working for us, what are the opportunities that we need to go after. So I love that. And talking about uh, risk, so if you consider risk, Krishna, I doubt if you can call it risky, because at some point of time you have to look at your career objectively. Is it taking the right path? Is it taking the right direction? And I really want to say this on this podcast. I want this to go live on this podcast, and that is, no B2B company will ever be able to give you the same opportunity that a startup can give you. And this is not just about Paperflight. I'm talking about any startup, hardware, software, service, solutions, whatever they sell, the kind of exposure that you can get as early as possible, no B2B company will ever do it. Because in B2B companies, everything is set, everything is, you're sitting in a very luxurious environment. In a startup, that's not the case. You learn the nuts and bolts of it so well, and that probably will see you through the next 5 years. Whereas in a B2B company, you probably have to take the first step action to upskill yourself and all that. So, yeah, that's how I would like to summarize that, Krishna.
Very true, Karthik. And call it fate or a happy coincidence. And I'm so glad for your time at Paperflight. Full disclosure, Paperflight was my first taste of a SaaS company, or even any interview for that matter. That was like the first ever interview that I attended right out of college. And of course, you remember, you were literally the first person in a professional setup that I got to interact with. You know, Huh. And
Yeah.
I'll probably be brutally honest about this. I was it was what, a couple of years ago, and I was this very stupid, confused teenager, and I did something petty and stupid. I'm sure you remember. Right after our interview at Paperflight, uh, I was looking for a content writing gig there, and right after the interview, which went pretty well, we got along well. I got along well with you, with Vinod and Ega, the entire team there. And Vinod asked me what my plans were later that day. And I was very casually, I said, "Oh no, I'm attending an interview at Amazon right after this." You know, now, looking back, that was pretty stupid for me to do that. And what happened next? That says a lot about you. You actually went ahead and dropped me in your scooty to a nearby Andhra hotel and basically pointed me the directions to InfoCity. That was a super kind gesture. You had no obligation to do that. It is,
No, no.
it is just consistent with how a lot of people see you. I've met a lot of folks in this networking events. You're this smart, kind human who you can always count on. So thanks for that. I probably want that to go on the record here.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
I love speaking to you that day. I remember the conversation very vividly, and I still remember you saying that you have an interview at Amazon, and and I do understand how people, how youngsters are, right? I can call you a youngster because I'm no longer a youngster myself, but yeah, people are ambitious, and they have all the rights to be ambitious, right? So we are nobody to judge people. If somebody has an opportunity, and I knew that there are so many people like you who come to our office, they're lost, but then it's our job. So that's what defines a company, a brand, the humans, the people who work, right, caring for each other, and that's what we're here for. And I strongly believe in it. Strongly believe, because that is karma, right? So you've got to do that to people. So that was nothing. Whatever I did, that I had
It,
forgotten that only when you
it's, when you
told me.
look back, it's probably a very trivial thing, for especially someone, hearing it on the outside. Imagine, someone else at your place who was not so kind, who were probably, what you would expect from a typical company to react in such circumstances. I might have easily, ended up deciding, oh no, these people, maybe SaaS industry is just like this. Let me just, try to ply my trade in some Amazon or, Infosys or something like that. It could have
Hmm.
easily turned out that way. So, yeah, I'm so glad for that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I enjoyed that.
So hearing from you on your whole stance on the traditional companies versus the new SaaS one, this is probably a little tricky, but I also think that might be the reason why it could also be interesting. So, what is one thing, one practice or the way something is handled in a typical B2B industry, like Accenture, Cognizant, that you would like the SaaS industry to pick up from? To put it simply, what is something that the big boys at Infosys, TCS are doing that is not a common practice in SaaS, but should actually be?
Hmm. Great question. I think one good thing, especially I'll talk about it from a marketing perspective.
Mm.
I think one good thing that they really do well is I think there are quite a few things that they do well, but the first thing that I would really want to highlight is the amount of uh, time that they spend before putting out a piece of content out there in the public domain is just incredible. You won't believe the number of people who um, work on a thought leadership piece or a blog or something that goes out of one of the leaders, one of the senior executives there out in the public domain. It's scrutinized. It's read, edited multiple times. Multiple people spend time on it. But in a SaaS environment, that's not possible. Let's just admit it. It's not possible that people will spend that much time or that much of scrutiny, because for B2B companies a lot of times it is the branding. Whatever they write, they are going to be known for what they write. And so here's the thing about Accenture, right? Accenture brings out something called a vision for what they believe are the biggest trends for that year. So for 2021, you'll see them around, let's say, I think they bring it out around March or April, or maybe I don't know. Their financial year ends in August, so probably around somewhere around that. But they bring out the top 5 things that they believe will be the biggest things in the IT industry, in the software industry. Now, software company SaaS companies, I have not seen a lot of them do that because it takes a lot of investments. Accenture used to put in a lot of money, engage with agencies, in-house, external people, make sure that the branding is correct, and that's something that I feel probably, if not in its entirety, at least a portion of it can be borrowed uh, and implemented. I'm not saying asking SaaS companies to pump in huge amount of money in churning out such large pieces that will last an entire year. What I'm trying to say is maybe do it on a much smaller scale, but at least the impact should be equally proportionate. That's what I'm trying to say. So for Accenture, what they used to do or what Cognizant does is when they put out such large pieces, they make sure that all the leaders speak the same language. So if Accenture says that machine learning, artificial intelligence, or whatever is it, or natural language processing, these are the 5 biggest trends that are going to happen in 2021. All the leadership makes sure they ensure that they speak the same language. Now, that's something that I feel SaaS companies can definitely borrow a leave out of their books and then implement it in a much smaller scale that suits their business, that suits their customers and buyer personas. That's one. So that's about the scrutiny, and that's about the amount of time that people spend. So that's something that I wanted to put on record, that SaaS companies can definitely borrow. And the second is about the process. Let's admit it, because the number of people that are there in traditional B2B companies So Accenture, I'm sure they have close to 200,000 people in India. So does Cognizant as well. Cognizant has probably got a lot more sitting in India. So they have these processes in place where if you are a business analyst or if you are, let's say, a project manager, you really don't have to go looking out externally for business and customers. There are enough conversations that happen over lunch tables, over right across desks, where people discuss a lot about upcoming opportunities within their client space, and that is how internal cross-selling is done. And then there are internal webinars, there are internal newsletters. A company like Cognizant or Accenture has got enough, at least scores of newsletters for every industry, every vertical, every horizontal that gets passed around. And people read these newsletters and understand what are the capabilities that are happening and reach out to the person who wrote that newsletter for a potential opportunity. And opportunities are chased and closed, and business deals are won based on these internal processes that they have set up for themselves. So I think this is also something that I'm sure a lot of SaaS companies are probably doing this or probably looking at ways to do this, but this is one brilliant way of borrowing from the SaaS companies. And I think at least from what I've read about Disney, they do this very extensively. And from what I've read, what they say is that they make sure that their employees are spending their time, spending their lunch time away from their desks in the cafeteria or in public spaces where they are able to meet other people from other departments within the same Disney company, correct? And some of the biggest blockbusters that Disney has produced and directed have emerged from these casual conversations. So it is the process, it is the culture that sets them apart, Krishna. That's what I feel uh, SaaS companies can borrow. So yeah, I'll pause here with this answer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes we can, revisit this whole move fast and break things culture that we have here. I think one more thing that I want to get your perspective as a marketer here, before we jump into the final part of the conversation is, what are some of the common misconceptions or inaccuracy in the way marketers are seen?
I think one biggest misconception is marketing is people think marketing is easy. It is not easy. It's not difficult either. It just needs a little bit of creativity. It needs a little bit of doggedness, and uh, and it needs a little bit of continuity and consistency. Is what I would put it that way. But marketing is surely not easy. So that's a myth that I surely want to bust. Number one, and
Thank you.
in many organizations, marketing is considered as a cost center. People view marketing as it's just a cost. They're just absorbing costs. But if you don't do any marketing or branding, you can say bye bye to your prospects out there. Because without marketing, you really don't have anything to say for yourself. I was speaking with Kaushik Kannan the other day, and he was saying the same thing. Without putting out content, without putting out those regular cadences, without putting out those content distribution mechanisms, marketing marketing will not be able to do their job. And for that, they need money. They need some money. I'm not saying that marketing should be the biggest cost function. You need to put in millions of dollars into marketing. What I'm trying to say is, so Freshworks, we all know Freshworks did this, right? When they won the award way back in 2011, 2012, all of the money that they won in that award, I think a lot of it went into marketing, and they've been so successfully doing it. So marketing should definitely have its fair share of budgets, but it should not be viewed as a cost center, or it should not be viewed as something that's very easy. It's not that way at all, Krishna. I want to definitely bust these two myths.
Plus one on that. Marketer just starting out. So,
Yeah.
so let's move on to the final part, which I like to call as the random deck. This has got nothing to do with you as a marketer or your profession. Maybe one of them is a little bit tied to that, but we'll get there. Just a random deck of questions to close with, right? So
Sure.
let me show the first one here. What are some of your favorite books that you have gifted the most, or probably like to gift the most?
I love to read autobiographies, Krishna, because that's the closest that you get to know the most famous people. So, one autobiography that I read many years back, 8 years back, that really stunned me into silence for several days was a book called Desert Flower by uh, a famous model. Her name is Waris Diri. She and Naomi Campbell were compatriots in the same industry, in the same fashion industry. But Waris was from an Ethiopian family, a nomadic family, and her autobiography about how she grew up, how she uh, ran away from home to the UK and then later on to the US and became a model, and how successful she was, and some of the practices at African nomadic families that she's discussed in the book is just blew me by its sheer intensity. The book is not very big; it's probably maximum about 200 pages, but I finished it sitting in one go because I couldn't really bring myself to keep that book down because it was so intense, and I feel we should all read that book. It really has an awakening. It evokes something inside me deep. That's one. The second is I would definitely call out Andre Agassi. Andre Agassi is open. A lot of people think people who are tennis fans out here who are listening to me, who are listening to us speak, people think that Agassi had long hair. In fact, he had a wig, and he's even spoken about an instance in one of the French Opens when his wig came out and he was in real tatters. His confidence was shattered before a match. So, but more importantly, the book itself is a glimpse into the life of uh, Agassi as a player born to Iranian parents and how he grew up and how and he's really got a very large heart the way he's written that book. So that's something influenced me. That's open for you, and I think those two books definitely rank on the top of my. So these are intense personalities, and third is uh, again in the autobiography genre, and that is A.B. de Villiers' biography. I just had to read that book just to know
Wow.
that person more deeper because he's one of my favorite players on the field, on the cricketing field. The way he conducts himself, the way he talks about, and honestly, I ride his emotions. When he wins, I am with him. When he loses, I am with him. So yeah, so those are the three books that I would want to call out.
Great picks, Karthik, and I'll make sure I'll add these in the show notes as well so people can
Sure, sure.
check these out, the relevant links. So let me jump on to the next one here. Considering how much you love marketing, if you weren't a marketer, what would you have ended up being?
um, I would have probably ended up being uh, a Japanese working with a Japanese company in some way, maybe a translator or maybe probably become a Japanese agriculturist working in Japan because I'm deeply influenced by their culture, by the way they conduct themselves, and uh, I have studied Japanese and I love the way. Uh, so I have a few Japanese friends and the way they conduct themselves, and it's I think really impressive. There is no taking away from that. The way there is this Japanese friend of mine who's actually settled in South India, who knows Tamil like nobody's business. He speaks Tamil so well, but he's actually a native Japanese, and he plays. I think he plays the violin very well. So he's into Carnatic music. So they are, I feel that I somehow feel drawn to that entire way of humility, paying respect to elders, making sure that you clean up after you leave. All those things really touch a chord with me, and I identify myself a lot with the Japanese culture. So someday, if I ever have a chance, I will surely make sure that I visit Kyoto, which is one of the most beautiful places on earth, with its temples and Shinto era shrines and all that. Yeah.
It's very beautiful. No? So I'll jump to the next one here. Uh,
Sure.
if there was a universal billboard which gets displayed in every town in the world, and you get to pick what message goes on in the billboard for the entire world to see, basically, what would you have on there? It could be a quote, or it could be, something that uh, you really believe in. It could be anything. What message would you leave on the billboard?
Interesting. Um, there are two things that come to my mind, Krishna, and one is this too shall pass. I am a strong believer in that, and it has worked. It has worked for me every time I narrate it. I tell that to myself. Uh, I know that I don't pay much heed to it, but then when I think back and reflect on it, I feel yes, this is really so true. That this too shall pass is so true. Whether it's happiness, sadness, anger, passion, whatever you want to call it, it will. It has. It has its ending. It will pass. So there will be a next phase that you will see. Number one, and the other thing that I would uh, urge is, which is probably slightly on the other spectrum, that is history repeats itself. So if you made a mistake several years back, if you've not taken enough effort to rectify it, be prepared for making the same mistake. And it has happened in my life. I have not taken adequate care to do to make sure that I, I do the right things, and I have paid for it multiple times. So I think these are two things that I want to leave on every billboard if given a chance, Krishna.
Now that probably brings me to the next one here. What advice would you give your 17-year-old self if you could meet him now?
I wish I would tell him that work on your personal branding, work on your LinkedIn profile, because that's or work on anything that differentiates you from the rest of the pack. Be known for something. I would definitely want to say this. I wish somebody had told me this. I know when I was growing up, there wasn't much of internet, or probably LinkedIn itself wasn't around, or even Amazon wasn't around. Jeff Bezos was not so rich as he is today. But I feel I really wish I had known it then. Uh, but in hindsight, it's fine. You learn things along the way, and you pass on your learnings to people who will benefit out of it. But I really feel that every one of us, whether he or she is listening to this podcast or anything, they're remotely connected to it, should work on his or her profile, his or her personal brand. It could be Instagram, it could be YouTube, it could be TikTok, anything. But please work on it.
Really well put, Karthik. Um, so I think, yeah, it's. I just have one or two here, and then we jump on to you getting to ask me one question.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
so if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, founders, sports persons, actors, who would you want to have dinner with, and just have a candid chat?
Um, I think if that were the case, then I'll probably go back to my ancestors if I can maybe have a di- dinner with one of my great grandpas or grandmas. I will definitely cherish that because I have not seen. And there's so much that I love about uh, the history, and I want to know about from them how they saw uh, their their uh, their lives. How was life during their times? I really want to hear that. It gives us so much perspective and makes us so much uh, wiser by every day. I have to say this, but my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, served uh, in the World War, in the Second World War, and
Wow.
his father passed away in the in a bomb attack in Rangoon in Burma, in present day Burma. But I heard stories of that's how he passed away. But I really want to understand from his perspective how life was during those times. So yeah.
Amazing, Karthik. Um, okay. So for the final question to you, if there is someone in your network, I'm sure you're connected to a lot of amazing people. You've had beautiful conversations with founders, fellow marketers, or salespeople. Who would you nominate to be a guest on the show here, knowing what the show is about and someone who you think should really get heard?
I'll surely go with Chris Walker. He's based in Boston, and I am really a fan of the way he conducts himself, the way he goes about his job, uh, the way he posts on LinkedIn. There's so much to learn from him. He himself is running a business of his own where he works with a lot of SaaS companies on their content and marketing strategy. But there is so much to learn from the way he. So forget about what Chris does for a living or as a profession, but there is a lot to just absorb from him. Uh, the way he the way he appears in front of the camera, or the way he writes, and his humility. So I would surely urge, if somehow Chris can come on this show,
Wow.
I would be the first person to jump on it and listen to it in the Takeaway podcast. Yeah,
Wow,
Takeaway Club.
let me see if I can justice to that there. So that wraps up with you being on the hot seat here. So for the final question, we reverse the tables and you get to ask me one question.
Oh, do I really? Okay. Okay. So if I were to ask you, Krishna, uh, tell me, what's the most important thing that you've learned so far in your life, Krishna?
Okay.
Anything. It could be from your family, from your days in Trichy, in Srirangam, could be from your graduate days, from your school days, from your days at Kanti or Facilio.
Wow.
Tell me that one thing that really that you always carry along.
I think I probably want to. The easy way out for me is to the power of reading books. That's
Hmm.
the one thing that I've learned in the last couple of years, how much it can change a person. You know,
Hmm.
A very real example is the person that you saw 2 years ago, the person that I was, and the person I am today. I like to think that I'm more confident and I'm more thoughtful about things. I don't rush into things, and a lot of that has got to do with starting to read books.
Hmm.
The funny
Hmm.
part is right now, as we have this conversation, I'm surrounded by nearly 5,000 books or more.
Oh, wow.
Back here in Srirangam, my hometown, my folks have a bookstore. You know,
Yeah.
and it's not your usual kind. It's religious
Yeah.
stuff, but nonetheless,
Yeah.
I have this huge rack right in front of me, with thousands of books on history, chemistry, and whatnot. And for the first 18 years of my life, I shied away from it. I never cared to pick even one book out there. But folks at my home, my grandfather is actually a published author who is pretty well known in the community. But for some reason, I had this aversion to books. Maybe it was
Hmm.
because I was surrounded by it all along and I sort of didn't understand the value. But after getting a job, and a couple of years in SaaS, something that I've really understood is have two people, going the same path, same job, they meet the same people, but one of them has access to books and the other doesn't. 5 years later, I can guarantee that their growth would have been exponential as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. And it reflects so well, Krishna. So I read this Jack Ma saying, when I read the Alibaba story. He says this in that book, and that is about, So you said 5 years later, the person who's read books will be exponentially better than the other person. But I don't think it's 5 years. I think it's less than 5 years. It's probably a range of 1 or 2 years. And Jack Ma says is that, the difference. I mean, the time that the things that you do between coming back home from work until you go back to work the next day will basically determine where you are in the next 1 year. So I think that was a very powerful thing. Now, I'm not saying that I mean, there are reasons for people to do that, and people work on their careers. Some people value their families and whatnot, but it is a very, I feel it's a very powerful thing to know and experience.
Right. Very true. No?
Yeah,
So that wraps up our session here, and this was super fun and insightful, Karthik. And knowing you, I didn't expect any less, and it certainly lived up to that for me. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and
absolutely.
hopefully, I know, knowing you as a person, I know we didn't touch upon a lot of things, your love for the army, or how big of a sports fan you are, something that we both share, and I certainly want to have you on here whenever that is.
Sure,
Let's do a second round
sure.
of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure thing, sure thing. And I really enjoyed my time talking to you, Krishna. And I really hope that the Takeaway Club, this podcast series, goes places. I'm sure
Thank
you're going to have more awesome guests in the future. I'm looking forward to every episode of yours.
you, Karthik. And
So
before
thank
we
you so
wrap up,
much.
so I
Sure.
thought a good place to end would be, sharing what you are up to. What are some of the stuff that you have coming out, or what are you excited about, and where people can reach out to you to learn about that.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things, there are a couple of side hustles that I'm doing, and so there are a couple of podcasts that I'm working on myself. I'm working one with Kaushik Kannan. So we already have a series going on YouTube. We already have it live. We've already launched it, but so this time, what we're trying to do is we've invited guests. We are inviting guests, speaking to them, understanding their perspective. We're doing that, so that will go live in a few days. It's the High On Stories podcast. That's number one. The second is I'm doing one with another person who's based in France. His name is now Nish, and that's the Spice Up Marketing podcast that we're doing. Again, that's also focusing on marketing experiences that people can bring from their marketing careers. That's what we're focusing on from all facets of the marketing functions, field marketing, email marketing, campaign managers. We're bringing people from all different places. So yeah, these are the two podcasts that I'm doing, and I hope that I'm able to scale it up, and I'm able to give a lot of value to people out of these two podcasts. With that, those are my two biggest things that I'm doing right now. And yes, I'm also working on my personal website. It's yet to be launched. I'm writing the copy for that, so it should be up in a few weeks' time. So yeah, that's the third thing that I'm working on. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Good luck, Karthik, and welcome to the club. Very
Thank you.
excited to
Thank you.
see your workout here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Take care.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on the Takeaway Club.
The pleasure is mine, Karthik.